For many years, it was commonly believed that the body and brain are separate. And whereas the body allows us to move, the brain is responsible for, amongst other things, our ability to speak, to think, and to learn. In fact, we always considered the brain to be in charge of the body. Today, we do know better. We know now that the functioning of the body and the brain can't be separated. For example, decades ago, it was discovered that the cerebellum, traditionally associated with movement and coordination of our body parts, is in fact very involved in many of our thinking functions. Since then, neuroscientists have found that the movements made by the body are responsible for the structure of the brain, and also that the movements of the body contribute an amazing amount to the functioning of the brain. Most of you will have observed the movements of a very young baby. These are typically the automatic, stereotyped, reflexive movements that are usually related to survival. For example, the sucking reflex. You will have also noticed that a very young baby, except when asleep, is hardly ever still. They are moving all the time. These are reflexive movements, not controlled by the baby himself. But after a while, the child will gradually develop more intentional, better controlled movements. And we think that it's the developing brain that makes this possible. This is true, but what we don't always realize is how these early reflexive movements help build the neural network that comprises the brain. Every movement results in some sensation going to the brain, whether it is movement of the arms or the legs or the eyes and so on. In fact, everything is movement. Sound travels in sound waves, which move. Light is perceived by the movement of the light waves. Touch is perceived often by the movement of air over our skins, or the movement when we put pressure onto our skin. Everything is movement. This constant stream of impulses to the brain travels through the central nervous system into the spinal column, via the vestibular system, which is the inner ear, and the cerebellum, which is responsible for motor activity. They activate the reticular activating system that we commonly call the RAS, which is in this portion of the brain, and which is critical for our ability to pay attention, and are finally processed by higher areas of the brain, which develop as a result of receiving these impulses. So we can say that every movement is a sensory motor event, linked to our interaction with and ultimately our understanding of the world. And this understanding is what we call learning. Once we've created the neural networks that we need in order to learn, movement further helps by enhancing the efficient functioning of our nervous system. Movement causes certain chemicals to be created in the brain that boost the ability of the brain cells, or neurons as we call them, to communicate with one another. Better communication means faster associations. Memory recall is faster, and general processing of incoming stimuli is fast and efficient. So, from the time of conception, movement is absolutely vital for healthy development of the nervous system and ultimately our ability to learn. But not all movement will necessarily be beneficial to learning. What is needed for remediation in order to help make sure the brain is structured correctly and can function really efficiently are slow, specific movements. Fast, disorganized movements may not result in a well-organized, highly efficient brain. So for this reason, some of our so-called hyperactive children may find learning difficult.
Now that we understand how experience can alter the structure and function of the brain, movement programs may be used equally effectively with individuals and groups.
For example, using a movement program in a school in Johannesburg, ILT found a significant improving in reading and maths ages and coordination in a group of grade 1 pupils. The teacher added that she had noticed improved concentration, more work completed, and faster information processing speed, and this all took place in only 8 weeks. Using a developmental movement sequence, an Australian study found that the average improvement for 6 remedial children was 7.7 months in only 7 weeks.